Welcome back. Today we're doing a deep dive into President Trump's recent proposal about Veterans Day and Victory in Europe Day.
That's right. He suggested renaming Veterans Day to Victory Day for World War I and sort of designating VE Day as Victory Day for World War II.
So we'll look at, how that could even happen legally, the history behind Veterans Day, VE Day itself, and of course the reactions we've seen already.
It's definitely sparked some conversation.
Absolutely. And hey, if you find this sort of analysis interesting, please do hit like and subscribe. It really helps us out.
Okay, so let's start with the announcement itself. It happened on, Thursday, May 1st?
Yeah, that's right, on Truth Social.
So President Trump posted his plan to rename November 11th, Veterans Day, to Victory Day for World War I, and then May 8th, VE Day, would become Victory Day for World War II.
And his reasoning, what was the argument there?
He talked about American strength, bravery, military brilliance, essentially arguing that the U.S. victories in those wars aren't celebrated enough by current leaders.
Contrasting it with perceived current weakness, maybe.
That seems to be the implication, yes. That renaming the days would somehow elevate the celebration of those specific victories.
Interesting framing. So he puts this idea out there, but legally speaking, can a president just rename a federal holiday? What's the actual process?
Well, that's a key point. According to, the Library of Congress and Congressional Research Service documents, it's actually Congress, the U.S. Congress, that has the sole power to create or change federal holidays. It requires legislation.
So an act of Congress, not just an executive order or something.
Exactly. It would need a bill passed by both the House and Senate, and then the president would have to sign it into law.
And Veterans Day is a federal holiday, right? November 11th.
Correct. It's one of the established federal holidays. But Victory in Europe Day, May 8th, that's actually not a federal holiday in the U.S.
Oh, right. So that's a distinction. People might observe it, but it's not official in the same way.
Precisely. And another layer here is that even Congress can't force states to observe a holiday. They designate federal holidays, which applies to federal institutions and sets a standard, but states decide their own legal holidays.
So it's complicated. Did Trump say how he planned to do this? Like work with Congress or?
That part's a bit unclear from the initial announcement. Whether he intends to push for legislation or was perhaps thinking of some other mechanism isn't specified.
Okay, that clarifies the legal hurdles.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Veterans Day itself. It has quite a history, doesn't it? It wasn't always called Veterans Day?
No, absolutely not. It started as Armistice Day. It was officially established, I believe, back in 1938.
Armistice Day. So marking the armistice of World War I.
Exactly. November 11th, 1918, when the fighting stopped between Germany and the Allies, it was specifically to honor the veterans of WWI, which people at the time called, the war to end all wars.
A very specific focus then.
Very specific. And the focus was as much on peace and the end of that massive conflict as it was on the veterans themselves initially.
So how did it become Veterans Day, honoring all veterans?
Well, after World War II happened and then the Korean War, there was a realization and advocacy from veterans groups.
Right.
Saying, look, we need a day to honor everyone who served, not just in World War I. We have millions more veterans now from these other major conflicts.
Makes sense.
So these groups pushed for the change. A town in Kansas, Emporia, actually proposed it first, I think. And then Congress acted. President Eisenhower signed it. And in 1954, Armistice Day officially became Veterans Day.
1954. So the name change was really about inclusivity.
Absolutely. To make it a day recognizing the service and sacrifice of all American veterans, regardless of when or where they served, including future conflicts like Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, all of them.
Okay, that history is important context for this whole renaming idea. Now, the other part of Trump's proposal involves VE Day, Victory in Europe Day. Tell us about that.
Right, VE Day. Observed May 8th in many Allied countries, it marks the formal surrender of Nazi Germany in May 1945.
The end of the war in Europe.
In Europe, yes. That's a crucial distinction. Because for the U.S., the war wasn't over.
No, the Pacific Theater was still going strong.
Exactly. Fighting continued against Japan until their surrender, which wasn't until September 2nd, 1945, VJ Day.
So calling May 8th Victory Day for World War II for the U.S. is, well, a bit incomplete, historically speaking.
It overlooks the significant final months of the war in the Pacific, yes.
Now, in his announcement, President Trump also made a specific claim about America's role in WWII, didn't he?
He did. He stated that the U.S. did more than any other country by far to win World War II.
By far. That sounds like a statement likely to get reactions.
And it has. Historians and commentators were quick to point out the complexities. Attributing victory solely or even primarily by far to one nation in such global global alliance is, well, debatable.
What about the contributions of, say, the Soviet Union or Britain?
Precisely. The Soviet Union's fight on the Eastern Front involved staggering casualties and was absolutely critical in defeating Nazi Germany. Britain held out against the Axis powers. You had contributions from Canada, Australia, France, resistance movements. Assessing contribution is incredibly complex. It involves looking at casualties, resources, different fronts, the length of engagement.
So saying the U.S. did more by far is seen by critics as minimizing those other massive efforts and sacrifices.
That's the core of the criticism, yes. Particularly sensitive given the immense human cost borne by nations like the Soviet Union, which actually observes Victory Day on May 9th due to time zone differences at the surrender.
Okay, so that claim adds another layer to the reactions.
Yeah.
What have we heard specifically from veterans groups about the renaming proposal itself?
The reaction there has been quite strong and largely negative.
Really?
Yes. For example, Paul Rieckhoff, who founded Independent Veterans of America, called the idea epically stupid and insulting.
Wow, strong words.
His point was that Veterans Day is meant to unite veterans from all eras, all conflicts, even those that didn't end in a clear victory. He also brought up past comments President Trump has made regarding veterans.
Any other groups?
Disabled American Veterans, or DAV, put out a statement that just said no, very direct.
Just no.
Yep. The American Legion, another major group, has apparently declined to comment so far.
Interesting. So definite pushback from some key organizations. What about individual veterans? Have we heard from them?
Yes, there have been reports quoting local veterans, guys like Phil Sickler and Ed Rathke mentioned in some articles.
And their take.
Similar concerns, really. Worries that renaming Veterans Day to focus only on World War I would narrow its meaning, that it might sideline the experiences and sacrifices of veterans from Vietnam, Korea, Iraq, Afghanistan, and so on.
They feel it takes away from the all veterans aspect.
Exactly. Their suggestions seem to be, look, if you want a Victory Day, maybe make it a separate day, but don't change Veterans Day, which serves this broader unifying purpose.
Has the White House responded at all to this backlash?
There seems to have been a slight clarification or potential backtracking. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt suggested later that maybe Victory Day for World War I could be like an additional proclamation on November 11th.
So not necessarily a full legal renaming of the holiday itself, but more like a ceremonial declaration alongside Veterans Day.
That's how it sounds, yes. A possible shift in messaging after the initial negative feedback. Of course, critics also jumped on the historical points we mentioned, like the war not ending for the U.S. on VE Day.
Right. So things might be shifting slightly. Okay, let's try and summarize what we've covered.
Sounds good.
President Trump proposed renaming Veterans Day to Victory Day for World War I and making May 8th Victory Day for World War II.
But legally, changing a federal holiday like Veterans Day needs an act of Congress, not just a presidential declaration. And VE Day isn't currently a federal holiday.
And we looked at the history how Veterans Day evolved from Armistice Day, specifically to honor all veterans from all conflicts.
Right. And this proposal has received significant criticism, especially from veterans